Let's get started with this lesson with a short warm-up. Here we have 3 questions. I'll actually have you pause this video and attempt to answer those 3 questions, and then we'll go over the answers. So go ahead and pause the video at this point, and I'll get back with you in just a second. Okay, let's look and see how you did on that first one. It says, what property of a real number lets you multiply a number by 1 and have a product equal to the original number? So I'm multiplying a number by 1, and my answer is the same original number. That property is going to be the identity property of multiplication. Number 2 is asking us to use mental math to answer this question. Now, when I look at this problem, I'm looking for things that are kind of like what we call anchor numbers. So for me, a couple of anchor numbers are here, 14 and 26. And I know if I put those together, I'm going to get a number that is a factor of 10. Okay, so 14 plus 26, that's 40. Then I will add the 37 to that. And that's an easier process for me to do. So when I add those together, I'll end up with 77. Number 3 is 2 parts. Here we're simplifying an expression. Okay, and I want to remind you, expressions have no equal sign. Okay, so they don't end up with an answer, but it's smaller. It's fewer numbers or fewer variables. So when I look at this first one, I have -5. The parentheses indicate multiplication. So I'm multiplying it times 2x. So what I'll do is I'll multiply the -5 times the +2, and we'll end up with a -10x in that one. For part B, again, I'm going to start with the numbers, and I'm just going to take those separately. 15 divided by 3. Just this part right here. 15 divided by 3, I know that's going to be a 5. Because there's 5 3's in 15. Now I'll move on to the next variable. Now I want to make sure that they're alike. Okay, and those 2 x's, actually, x divided by x cancel each other out, so they go away. And so the only thing that's left is that y, and we'll bring it over. And you're going to end up with an answer of 5y. Okay. Hope you did well on those. If you didn't get what you wanted, write a question down. If you're still confused, we'll come back and we'll talk about it in class. Let's go ahead and move on to the lesson for today. And we're going to talk about the distributive property. This is going to be in section 1.7 of your notes. So if you'll turn to those notes, our objective today is we want to use the distributive property to simplify expressions. Okay, and again, we're trying to reduce the number of numbers or the number of variables. So here's some vocabulary. Distributive property, which is what we're working on. Term, constant, coefficient, and like terms. Things are the same. So here in this table, I'm going to show you some operations with the distributive property. Now what I like to tell people is with the distributive property, I'm taking whatever is on the outside of the parentheses. Okay, and notice there's no operation, no addition sign, no subtraction sign, so it indicates that we're multiplying. So whatever's on the outside, we're multiplying to each item on the inside. And I like, with my tutoring students, what I've found that works really well with them is drawing arrows. So if I apply the distributive property, I'm going to take a times b, see that right here, and then I'm going to multiply a times c, which you see right here. Okay, and we have an example here to the side. Same thing, I'll take 4 times 20, and then I'll multiply 4 times 6. And I will tell you, one of the most common mistakes is students may only multiply these two and they forget about multiplying what's on the outside to the second number. Okay. Now the distributive property also works if the number's behind the parentheses. Same thing. I'm going to take the number outside times the first one on the inside, and I'll do it to the second one on the inside. Same thing. With subtraction inside the parentheses, distributive property will still work. A times B and A times C, but a lot of times we'll say A times negative C, okay? This is seen as one term, okay? Terms, term. They are separated. You may want to write this down. Separated, sorry about my handwriting, by a plus sign or negative sign on one side of the equal sign, okay? And we'll talk more about that as we go. Okay, let's practice some of the distributive property problems. So we want to know what's the simplified form of these. So again, take the number on the outside, multiply it times the number on the inside, the first one, and the second one. So if I rewrite it, it'll look like this. 4 times x and 4 times 5, and I'll bet you guys all know what 4 times 5 is. And so that's my simplified expression. I cannot do any more than that. These two will not go together. So I want to point out something. This is a term, and this is a term. So this expression has two terms, okay? Let's apply this distributive property to the second problem here. And again, I'm going to do the same thing. Negative 6 times a positive 4b. And this time, negative 6, and I'm not going to say times just 1. I'm going to say it's times negative 1. Okay? Whatever sign is in front of the number stays with the number. Okay? So you'll see we have the 4b times the negative 6. We have negative 1. Again, that negative sign stays with the 1 times negative 6. And one thing you'll have to remember is a negative times a negative is a positive. A negative times a positive is a negative. So this is what we'll end up with, a negative 24, but we get a positive 6 because of these two negatives. Okay, here's some extra practice. I'll have you go ahead and pause the video at this time. Work through these problems to the best of your ability. Even if it means you make some mistakes or get something wrong, don't erase it when I come back and show you answers. Save those. Write your new work to the side if you need to. Okay, and again, if you have any problems, any questions, write them down, bring them to class. We'll talk about those together. So go ahead and pause the video at this time. Okay, we're back. So let's look at what the answers are for these three problems. The first one, the first one, the second one, and the third one. These are your answers. 5x plus 35, a 36 minus 2t, and a 1.2 plus 3.3c. I'm going to guess that these last two, with the fraction and with the decimals, you're going to feel like are a little bit harder. I will tell you, just take your time, don't rush, find tools that will help you, write it out to the side if that's necessary. Again, if you had trouble with these, write it down. Let's talk about them in class tomorrow. Okay, this time we're going to, again, make use of the distributive property, but we want to rewrite this as a sum or difference that is equivalent to this rational expression. Okay, a rational expression is like a fraction. So the first thing we need to do is I'm going to change this from a fraction, okay, to two separate expressions. Okay, so I'm going to pull that 5 from underneath the 3x plus 1. I'll pull it out in front. I'm undoing the distributive property, right? Each of these things looks like they're being divided. So I'm going to pull that out in front and make it 1/5. Now I'll reapply the distributive property here, multiplying the 1/5 individually to each of these terms, which will result in this, right? I'm multiplying the 1/5 times the first term and 1/5 times the second. You should end up with an answer that looks like this, okay? If you need to, remind yourself that any whole number can be written as a fraction, if that helps you, by putting it over 1, and then multiply straight across. 1 times 3, we get 3. 5 times 1, we come down here and we get 5. Same in the second fraction. 1 times 1, we get 1. 5 times 1, we get 5. If you need help with some extra practice, let me know on fractions, and we can do that. Okay, I'll let you try this one on your own. Go ahead and pause the video, and then I'll come back with you and we see how we did. Okay, so the process, again, for this one, for this problem, 4x minus 16 divided by 3. Same kind of steps, right? First thing, we change it to from being divided by 3 to being multiplied by 1/3. Okay. We apply that 1/3, right? Multiply it times each of the terms on the inside, and then we will simplify, okay, to get the answer. Okay. Again, write down any questions you may have.